Today, we're going to be taking a look at a job that takes full advantage of powerful dark magics and debilitating ailments, the Arcanist. The Arcanist boasts incredibly high magic stats, making them a prime candidate for dealing massive amounts of damage to all opponents through traditional black magic, or by applying ailments that trigger crippling blows for all unfortunate enough to be affected. So, let's take a quick look at the Arcanist's specialty, absorb magic damage. Anytime the Arcanist is hit by a magic attack, they will heal 25% of the total damage done as HP. As an example, if the Arcanist takes 1000 damage from a fire spell, they will heal 250 HP. This is sort of a self-sustain tool, and you'll probably be saved by this once or twice throughout the game, but it isn't anything really to fawn over. First up on our line of combat abilities is Corpse. This is the player's way of casting Doom on enemies. There's a 75% chance of this spell activating, which can be raised by chance increasing buffs like Prayer. If Corpse lands, the enemy will die 2 turns later, no exceptions. If you struggle to kill regular enemies in more than 2 turns, Corpse can come in handy, as it assures the deaths of any standard foe. But as I'm sure you could figure out, Corpse doesn't work on most bosses, making its uses very few and far between. Second is the Arcanist's most iconic spells, their ailment attacks. These consist of 2 attacks, Exterminate and Twilight. Starting with Exterminate, this spell will deal an insane amount of dark damage to all enemies and allies who find themselves afflicted with the poison status ailment. This is where having black magic or genome abilities come in handy, as you will need to apply the ailment onto the enemy for the spell to do anything. Thankfully, not only are most enemies susceptible to poison, but most bosses are as well, though they are harder to slap the ailment onto. This allows for the Arcanist to bring its full might to most encounters without much worry, though they might need some time to actually apply the ailment on the enemies first before they can send them to hell. Either way, fairly useful spell. Then we have Twilight, which is very similar to Exterminate, just needing the enemies to be under the sleep ailment instead. Literally every boss except for one have an immunity to sleep, so this ability is mostly locked to random encounters only. Third is Sacrifice. The user will lose 25% of their max HP to raise their magic attack by 50% for 3 turns. This ability just adds on to the already high magic attack power of the Arcanist, meaning that if you weren't already hitting the damage cap, you will be now. If you intend to rely on Sacrifice to boost your Arcanist's magic attack, make sure to watch their HP, especially since the Arcanist is already one of the easiest to kill jobs in the game. Have a healer on standby. Next up are Annihilation and Iniquity. These spells are mirrors of each other, so let's talk about Annihilation first, and then compare it to Iniquity. Annihilation will unleash a powerful dark elemental attack on all enemies and party members who are at or below -1 BP. This can be useful if you're battling against enemies or bosses who get a little too greedy with their BP charges and find themselves in the negative too often. Just keep your own team in mind when you use it so you don't accidentally hurt them too. Iniquity has the opposite requirement, only hitting combatants with 1 BP or higher. Use this against enemies and bosses that like to default a lot to build up BP, punishing them for playing defensive. Both of these attacks are situational, yet powerful, so if you intend to use them, analyze the current situation closely before choosing the right one to use. Lastly, we have Internment. This ability is a very powerful AoE dark magic spell that costs 1/4 of the user's maximum MP. This is the Arcanist's most straightforward means of dealing damage, and pairs well with Mimic or Free Lunch to deal as much damage as possible. If you don't have access to either of those tools, then save your MP until you find the right time to land a powerful blow against an enemy. Internment can also be a wonderful grinding tool, even if it comes very late into the game. First up on the support abilities, we have 2 that both affect the power of black magic. When I said that the Arcanist synergizes well with black magic, these were the abilities that came to mind when I said that. Black Magic Amp is pretty easy to explain, as it raises the power of all black magic spells by 25%, while also making their cost 50% higher. Max Black Magic works similarly, raising the power of black magic by 50% while doubling the cost of black magic. Both of these can be paired together to increase your magic output to an insane degree, but one thing I must point out is that your MP is going to dry up fast, with either of these equipped, let alone both of them. It might be best to swap over to Black Mage when using these abilities, so that you can use the Freelancer or Swordmaster as a sub-job to keep your MP consumption under control. Second is the Arcanist's specialty, Absorb Magic Damage. The effect of this ability is pretty underwhelming as a specialty, so there really isn't a good reason to go out of your way to equip it on a character unless you want as many self-sustain options as you can muster. Just make sure that the user can actually survive being hit before thinking of using this. Next is Save Black Magic MP. For 2 support slots, the user will now have a 25% discount on Black Magic specifically. This ability stacks with other MP reducing effects, so you can potentially make the cost of Black Magic really, really low. I personally prefer effects like these, that increase the ease of use for magic over ones that increase damage, but make them more expensive. Pair Save Black Magic MP with something like Pierce Magic Defense, and you will have a low-cost, powerful magic damage dealer on your hands. Now we've come to Zero. This ability will raise the damage output of magic attacks by 50% if the user has 0 as the last digit of their MP when they cast the spell. Under normal circumstances, this would be incredibly difficult to predict unless you did the math ahead of time, but thanks to abilities like Free Lunch, you can actually plan around it, making 0 a decent substitute for other damage increasing buffs that the Arcanist normally has access to. Next up is Convergence. When equipped on the user, any spell that normally can only be group casted will now have its range of targets narrowed to just 1, while increasing its power by 50%. Now, do note that this only applies to damaging magic, like the Arcanist's Internment, and will not affect spells like Extermination or Iniquity, since they aren't traditional spells. Convergence helps the Arcanist hit the damage cap of Internment easier, but that's already pretty pointless since Internment is already so freaking strong. Unless I'm missing something, I really wouldn't bother with Convergence all that much. Last up, we have Status Ailment Amp. This support ability is a must-have for the Arcanist, as it makes landing ailments like poison and sleep so much easier. Putting poison on bosses becomes a cinch with this support ability, as normally you'll struggle to apply it, wasting the party's precious time and BP. Status Ailment Amp is also a must if you want to run the funky Poison BP battery build, as it assures that your entire party becomes poisoned without any real issue. Do not forget the support ability when outfitting your Arcanist. Seriously, don't. And now, let's discuss how the Arcanist performs as a main job. Let's talk positives first. To start off, the Arcanist sports the highest intelligence stat in the game for consistently hitting the damage cap with almost any form of magic. Their mind is also surprisingly high, which can allow the Arcanist to play an effective support role, healing the party with ease. Poison plus Exterminate is a powerful combination that, thankfully, works on almost every enemy and boss in the game, as long as you have Status Ailment Amp equipped. Also, Internment can pick up Exterminate's slack where it fails to hurt enemies. But while we're talking about the Arcanist's abilities, that leads me into the core weakness of the job in my opinion. The majority of the Arcanist's spells and abilities require a specific trigger in order to activate, and some of these triggers just outright don't work in certain scenarios. This unfortunately means that the Arcanist is incredibly inconsistent in its usefulness and utility, compared to its other magical counterparts, who can just push a button, and all of a sudden, every living thing in a 10-mile radius is on fire. Not to mention that the Arcanist needs to have certain jobs in the party in some way to function at all, and it is the only job in the game like this. And looking at the Arcanist as a sub-job doesn't really change all that much. Certain abilities like Sacrifice might see more use on jobs like a Dark Knight, since they can take advantage of the damage increase without needing to worry about the HP loss nearly as much. The Vampire and Spellfencer can also take some advantage of the ailment abilities of the Arcanist, since they will have an easier time applying ailments to an enemy with their own abilities. But the remaining abilities like Annihilation, Iniquity, and Corpse are still very niche, and won't see much play. Now, if you're looking to play an Arcanist, maybe you'll see these limitations as a challenge to overcome that adds an extra layer of complexity to every fight. And if that's the case, then go for it. Who am I to stop you? But for most players, they will see this as an annoyance that makes playing this job feel sluggish and annoying. So then, how does the Arcanist's fashion hold up to the competition? Well, let's start with the negatives first, shall we? The one-piece suit and the tail aren't really my favorite. The color scheme of the red, black, and white just doesn't really mesh very well in my opinion here either. But I will say that I do like the symbol in the middle of the body piece, as it adds an extra layer to the outfit that it badly needed. But absolutely the best part of this design in my opinion, and this might be a little controversial, I don't know, it is the hat. I love the Arcanist hat. It always gives me the impression of a crazed jester gone mad with dark, powerful magic, and I just love that vision. The hat alone saves the male Arcanist design from being a very low C tier, but honestly, a high C tier is about as best as I'm gonna give it. The girl's design isn't really all that special either. The dress and tail are still not my favorite, and I just don't like the outfit being a big mesh of red. Once again, the headpiece wins out as being the best part of the design, but it still isn't anything too crazy. C tier for the ladies as well.